All right, good morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Vollendroff. The lobby is open, the recording has begun. Thank you for your patience as we work on some training.
Thanks. We will convene the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. Good morning, everybody. We're going to start with a human resources update with our HR Director, Anita Bingham. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to provide you some information today from the HR team that is available through the OFM dashboards and our internal tracking.
Great. All right, give me 1 second to get your slides up, Anita.
Thank you. All right, those are the topics we plan to share with you today.
Okay.
Next slide, Dustin.
I'm working on it.
Okay. All right, there we go. So as the budget allows, the agency provides employees up to $3,500 per fiscal year for tuition reimbursement. We did see a significant drop in those employees utilizing the benefit in the last biennium. And so with that, we'll continue to make sure new employees are aware of this benefit. And just jump in if you have any comments or questions as we go through. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through them. This slide shows the history of our overtime cost. During COVID years, our overtime dropped, and for 2022, we had some overtime in public records, licensing, and enforcement, and we may see some related to the SMP project work that's ramping up, but we're still pretty low there. This slide shows the number of sick leave hours cashed out to employees. Sick leave buyout is done in January of each year. We all earn 96 hours of sick leave each year. Of the 96 hours earned in the year that is not used, the remaining balance may be cashed out, provided the balance is above 480 hours. The employee, if eligible, has the option to cash out the balance that is not used. The sick leave balance is reduced by the full amount of hours not used in the year, but the payout is 25% of its value. If they choose not to cash it out, it continues to accrue until they retire, and at retirement, the funds are rolled into a VEBA at 25% of its value. Sick leave uses, we did see during COVID that people were not using very much sick leave, probably because people were at home and not getting sick as often. And if they didn't feel quite well, I think it was easier for people to work from home. So that was just interesting to see how that dropped during the COVID period. We continue to have a good number of people using the family medical leave. Payroll is doing a good job of tracking and keeping employees and supervisors aware of balances that people have towards their allotment. So just to show you where we're at with that. So this is leave without pay. Some leave without pay is due to employees receiving payment from the paid family medical leave program, which became available in January of 2020. When an employee has a qualifying event, then they can apply through the PFML and get a partial payment of their salary. When an employee is approved for that program, they have the option to use for what type of leave they want to use. More employees are taking advantage of PFML, whether on FEMLA or not, because the PFML is more broad in terms of who's covered. And so an employee must keep their medical insurance premium paid, so that they may use some personal leave and the rest as PFML until that is exhausted. The Wellness Committee has been active. If you attended our parking lot recognition event earlier this year, you probably saw that they were there with their giveaways. Lisa Reese just recently returned from in-service. And they were able to bring in several vendors, including flu and COVID booster vaccinations to the in-service, which was appreciated by staff. We have some new committee members, and they're putting their bios on the wellness page as a way to introduce themselves. OFM was kind enough to include us in their lunchtime yoga classes, and I personally enjoyed and taken advantage of those. The step contest that they're doing encourages people to get out and walk and track their walking and be eligible for prizes. And the divisional challenge has been fun. We have a trophy that's been passed around as different divisions will win that. We had about 30 people take advantage of the flowers and vegetables that were brought in to share from people's gardens. And the wellness room on the 5th floor is in process of being soundproof so that people can have privacy if they want to have online appointments with their doctor while they're at work. We advertised the nutrition lunch and learn classes offered by DES. And within the last 4 months, they've been using the Survey Monkey to gather feedback on what people would like to see from the committee. They're hoping to get to some pre-COVID activities going next March, such as the mammogram bus, softball, and the YMCA fund run. So we'll see if that happens maybe next year. We've had a steady decline in people taking advantage of our wellness incentive. Employees can be reimbursed up to $900 a year for a gym membership, online fitness memberships, park passes, weight and nutrition management fees. There was definitely a drop in participation in 2020, which is likely tied to COVID. We are seeing a trend where people are not going to gyms and instead they're just using free online programs. But we know that people tend to wait till the end of the year sometimes and submit their reimbursements. So we may see an uptick at the end of the year on that. OFM is using the Bureau of Labor Statistics as a benchmark to compare how our turnover rates compare to other state and local government rates. Total separation are actions when employees leave state service. These include non-perm, resignation, retirement, seasonal, disability, dismissal, layoff, and other miscellaneous voluntary and involuntary actions. This slide shows the LCB in comparison to the enterprise. So in fiscal 2022, we see that we were lower in the percentage of those that resigned, but a bit higher in the percentage of employees who retired. This is the slide presented to you at EMT showing our turnover year to date, and it was so far about 55 people that have left our agency. This slide shows the percentage of employees who left due to resignation or movement to another agency. All permanent and non-permanent employees are included. We have been pretty similar to the enterprise rates, although in the last few years, we've had a slightly higher number compared to the enterprise. Our agency, though, is fairly small with limited promotional opportunities, so people sometimes need to leave to be promoted, which is expected. And sometimes they come back to us, so that's always nice. This slide was also discussed at the recent EMT meeting, but as a refresher, we have 8 employees who are eligible to retire now, and that number will continue to grow as our workforce ages. This slide shows that the state is doing well in allowing for mobility and flexibility, which we know is very important to people. For us, some divisions are coming back into the office for a few days a week, and some activities are also bringing people back into the office. According to what we have entered in HRMS, we have 44% of our staff on a compressed schedule, 65% on a flexible schedule, and 89% doing some sort of telework. So we're doing really well with that.
Anita, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry, going back to the slide on eligible employees for retirement. How do you define eligible for retirement?
It varies per plan. I actually had to reach out to Martha to get that number. It varies with what plan you're in, but we also know that we have a large amount of enforcement officers that have already retired from another law enforcement plan, so they basically could go at any time, and I think that was about 22 of those folks.
Thank you.
But Anita, on that, so it doesn't just mean that's not a graph of people who are 65 necessarily, but of an age and years of service that under their retirement plan, they're eligible?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
Thank you. And wait, one last one on that. Do you have a sense of how our eligible to retire population measures to statewide within state government numbers? I mean, do we have a particularly aging workforce within the LCB, or does it seem commensurate with state government as a whole?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could look into that. I don't really know off the top of my head, but that's something I could find out for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious, and also just, raises, the headline here, succession planning, and a conversation for another day. But what do we do? How do we go about doing this? And have we identified places where we need to, where we do maybe have a particular concentration of retirement age people where we need to do something? But I'd be interested in diving a little deeper into that piece at some point.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, most of the management team did take a succession planning class a couple years ago, and we did put a plan together, but I think it's probably needs to be updated. I think, things change obviously over the years in terms of people that have come and gone, but we did identify key positions and sort of who might be in place to be identified for those positions.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, Anita, is it possible that we could see a copy of the plan that was put together a couple years ago, just to see what was in place then? And, I'd love to see that.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
All right, so this information comes from, let's see, this is fiscal year 22 was just released, and we had a total of 133 appointments. The majority of those are within the agency, 68.4%, and 31.6% were new hires. Of course, we know when people promote within, it creates a vacancy for their position, which is often, eventually filled outside. For example, we tend to see this in licensing, where people promote from the entry-level customer service positions. This information comes from the NeoGov system and shows the application and hiring process by ethnicity. It's important to look at these numbers in the context of our state demographics. The number of applicants and hires are low for Hispanic, Latino, Native American, and Asian groups with respect to their population in Washington State, which is approximately 13%, 2%, and 9.2% respectively. The number of applicants for Black and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander and white are more closely aligned to their population percentage in Washington State, which is approximately 3.8, 0.8, and 63.8 respectively. It's important to note too that 12% of applicants and 13% of hires have identified as 2 or more races, which is unknown.
A question there. I'm looking at the Black or African American line, and I don't think I'm tracking the numbers. So, to what you were just talking about, sort of hired as representative of the population, they're the eligible. Is it the eligible number? 4.8% is the measure. So, of the 4.8% of the population that's eligible, we're at 3.3%.
The eligible actually reflects the people that qualified for the position, so they were deemed eligible to move on.
So yeah. That's so the numbers you were looking at was applied to hired?
Yes, yeah, we had 147 applications. 6.1% of those identified as Black and applied for our positions.
Which off the top of my head, I think might be close to the population statewide, but do we look at that, and should we? So is that also part of the equation, so to speak, that, because it's possible that the percent of people who apply are less than that percent of that group's, less than that group represents statewide. And that could point other issues, right? If we're just not getting applicants from Hispanic or Latino, say.
Yes, that's true. And that is something that Vipin has picked up on, and he's doing some additional outreach when we see that we're just not getting applications in from those groups. So Black, I was showing us 3.8%. So of our population is Black. So we're actually doing pretty well for that one.
I see.
Yeah.
Is that number based on the most recent census?
I'll have to ask Vipin where he draws that percentage from. I'm assuming it is from the most recent census.
Okay, that strikes me as lower than I thought, but yeah, I'd be curious what numbers we're using. So thanks.
Okay. So this slide reflects employees who have current position descriptions, expectations, and evaluations. The data is pulled from HRMS as of June 30th and is reported to the reported in the Human Resource Management report that we have to submit to State HR each year. It's not reflected on this chart, but as of June 30th, we are at 98.7% complete for evaluations and 96.7% complete for expectations. Those are two different numbers that we track because they're two separate documents. We do our evaluations each year from September to November, so we're currently in this process, and we will continue to send out reminders to supervisors to try to keep that number up because we're doing really well in that area. So kudos to our supervisors. We have made some progress in getting our HR policies updated. We have a person assigned to work on each policy that is due for review, and then we review it as a group before it goes to management team for their feedback. There are really no major changes with those first two there. The ethics policy, though, we did get a demand to bargain filed by one of our unions on that, and we met with them recently, and they were concerned with some language that we had added that had perceived conflict of interest and conflict of interest. So we're trying to make some revisions on those to align with the RCW that talks about you can't have a direct or indirect conflict of interest. We feel like going back to that language might be a little more clear for them. That just went back out to the management team, and once we have their feedback, then we have one more step of sending it to the ethics board for their approval before we can finalize that one. This slide shows our compliance of required training for non-supervisory employees. The statewide diversity training previously offered through Department of Enterprise Services has not been available for a couple years. The update from DES is that they're currently refining the training using feedback from pilot classes, which some of our employees did participate in. They've not yet provided a date when the training will be available, but they know that agencies are becoming past due until they offer it again. So hope that comes soon. The entire agency, though, did take implicit bias training back in March 2019. So we have had some training as an agency. This is how our managers and supervisors are doing with these required trainings. DES is also updating the Leading Others class, so it hasn't been available. They anticipate it will be available again next spring. And the mitigating implicit bias in the hiring practice and process is a half-day class that has been available. So we just need to remind people to sign up and take that one. It's a really good class. The leadership roadmap is updated at least quarterly. And although training availability through DES is picking up, many of the classes on our roadmap are still listed as to be determined. So in the world of labor, we're waiting for both contracts to be ratified by the members. But what we have seen is that the tentative agreements include a 1,000 retention bonus for those employees that are with us on July 1st this year and still employed next year on July 1st, and a $1,000 bonus for receiving the booster vaccination by December of next year, as well as a 4% increase next July and a 3% in 2024. So it's a pretty significant compensation package. We're not sure what will be given to non-represented employees, but we should know within the next few weeks as all those contracts get ratified. We usually start getting more information from state HR about that. We had our first grievance. We have our first grievance related to the vaccine mandate separation going to arbitration. Director Brady and I will both be participating in the hearing that's coming up on October 4th. And we know that being vaccinated will remain a condition of employment through WAC and the CBAs. No word yet if the end of the executive order will change our mask requirement when interacting with the public, but we will stay tuned to see if there's any update to that. And then finally, we will be getting ready to post our CIO position, CFO, I should say, position next week.
In case George is listening, you better.
I know, right? I better get that one right. And our new tribal liaison position is out with management team to take a look at. We're anticipating hopefully getting that one going soon. And the program specialist 5 and admin assistants are new positions in licensing, which will be supporting social equity and SMP.
Great.
Any questions or comments?
Let me check with others first. Any questions, Jim or Ellen?
I have a quick comment more than anything.
Yeah,
So,
please.
and it's hard to tell based on COVID how some of these things are impacted, but specifically the tuition reimbursement and the wellness incentives and the use of those are two things that obviously stood out to me. And as a person who ended up getting their graduate degree based on tuition reimbursement, I really value that as an incentive in the workplace and a benefit that employees have. And then the Wellness Committee, I'm really impressed with the work of the Wellness Committee. And it's an area where I just want to put out there, if there's ever opportunity or value in board participation in the Wellness Committee, that would be a committee that I'd be interested in participating in the future.
Okay, great. I'd love to hear that. Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
One last question for me, just a little one on overtime. Do we have a specific OT budget line agency-wide? Does it go by department, or is it just?
I think it's just included in our overall budget, so we have to take into consideration if we're going into overtime, how that just accounts for our entire budget.
Right. Okay. Great. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so thank you, Nita.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to you soon. Okay, we've got two rule petitions to review that we will act on at tomorrow's board meeting. And Audrey Basic, there you are. The Policy and Rules Coordinator on the alcohol side will give us the rundown on both those. Good morning.
Morning, Chair Postman, board members Garrett and Volendroff. Excuse me.
Hi, Audrey.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So yeah, as Chair Postman stated, tomorrow I will be presenting the staff recommendation on two rule petitions. So I'll just briefly go over those today and save a longer presentation for tomorrow. But the first one is related to wine of a winery's own production. The board received this petition on August 1st from Josh McDonald on behalf of the Washington Wine Institute. And this is the petition that requests the board amend WAC 314-24265 to allow Washington domestic wineries to sell any wine that they produce in Oregon at their Washington winery locations. So in effect, this petition is requesting that any wine that a domestic winery produces in Oregon, for example, through a contractual agreement with an Oregon winery, be considered wine of a domestic winery's own production. So to understand this request, it's helpful to have some background on the statutory framework for domestic wineries. So under the domestic winery license in RCW 6624-170, domestic wineries are granted limited rights to act as retailers and distributors of wine of their own production. They're allowed to sell wine of their own production at retail, on the winery premises, and at tasting room locations, but are required to obtain a separate retail license. So for example, a restaurant license or retail specialty shop license, if they want to sell wine not of their own production at those same premises. So while wine of a winery's own production is not defined in statute, the statutory framework for domestic wineries indicates that wine of a winery's own production must, with some limited exceptions, be produced within Washington state. So the definition of domestic winery in statute is, quote, a place where wines are manufactured or produced within the state of Washington, end quote. And similarly, the domestic winery license, quote, allows for the manufacture of wine in Washington state from grapes or other agricultural products, end quote. So wine that is produced out of state is not generally considered wine of a domestic winery's own production, but there are some limited exceptions. For example, the winery license specifies wine produced in Washington state by a domestic winery that's then shipped out of state to be made into sparkling wine, then returned to the domestic winery for resale, is deemed manufactured in the state and does not require a special license. Our current rule in WAC 314-24265, that's the subject of this petition, also recognizes another limited exception if a number of conditions are met. So the licensee has to receive approval from the board. They have to hold both a Washington winery license and an Oregon winery license, and the underlying ownership of the two winery licenses has to be identical. And both the Oregon and Washington wineries have to manufacture wine within the same TTB authorized cross-border appellation, and the appropriate wine taxes have to be paid. So if all those criteria are met, then the winery can consider that wine of their own production and sell it at their tasting room locations and their winery premises. So that rule, as it's currently drafted, represents the outer edge of the board's authority under the existing statutory framework, and expanding it as requested in this petition would conflict with what's authorized under the statutory framework. So tomorrow I'll be recommending that the board deny this rule petition. So before I get into the next one, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Don't see any. But I'll just say I appreciate the time you gave me to go through this. I guess it was yesterday, and I learned about the American viticultural areas, which is pretty interesting. So once I dug into this one, it was kind of interesting. Yeah. So thanks. We can move to the next one.
Well, thank you for listening to that presentation, and I'll try to make this next one brief too. So this second petition is one the board received on August 5th from Tim Churchill on behalf of Hop Hop's Bottle Shop in Spokane. So this petition requests the board adopt a new rule to allow the sale of Washington craft beer at the Spokane airport through a secure age-verified vending machine. In speaking with the petitioner, he explained that under this concept, the vending machine would sell beer for off-premises consumption only. It would not be located in age-restricted areas or have any employees monitoring it. And it would rely on cloud-based internet technology to verify customers are of legal age and not intoxicated. So the issue presented by this rule petition is whether the board should initiate the rulemaking process to consider allowing the sale of beer through vending machines. So to give some background, under the liquor license statutes, there are around 25 different types of retail liquor licenses available, each with different privileges and conditions, but none of those appear to be appropriate for a vending machine that sells beer for off-premises consumption. In addition, the vending machine is potentially a mobile structure that doesn't fit within our current statutory framework for liquor licensing. So under RCW 6624-010, taken as a whole, it indicates that liquor license premises need to have a building with a fixed physical location. So a vending machine on its own could be moved around, and as a result doesn't appear to fit within that framework for liquor licensing and wouldn't be eligible. Additionally, there's a self-checkout register statute that allows retailers to use self-checkout registers to sell liquor. That RCW 6624-660. And it allows retailers to sell liquor through self-checkout registers if the register is programmed to halt the transaction during the purchase of liquor until an employee of the retailer intervenes and verifies the age of the purchaser by reviewing established forms of acceptable identification. So, as described in this petition, the self-checkout process would seem to eliminate any review of the liquor sale transaction by employees of the retailer, and that appears to conflict with that self-checkout register statute as well. So there are also some public health and safety concerns that I describe in more detail in the staff recommendation document, but I won't get into those today. But in conclusion, it appears this request would require statutory changes that can be made by the legislature or voters through the initiative process, but are beyond the board's rulemaking authority. So for the same reasons as the other petition, the director's office staff recommend denying this petition as well. And thanks for listening to that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I have none.
Okay, great. Thanks for those, and we'll see you tomorrow for action on those too.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye. That just takes us to our, I should have said at the top, we have one small change in the agenda. We had Rick Garza on the agenda for an agency update at this point, but he's out sick today, and so we will put that off to another caucus. And then that takes us to any board member reports. Anything to share, members?
I have a couple of things.
Sure.
So just wanted to bring to everyone's attention the research symposium that was held on September 16th at the University of Washington on high THC cannabis and legal regulated markets. It was recorded. We had good representation from LCB staff at this event, but I would encourage folks who have time to look at the recording and the agenda and see what recorded sessions might be of particular interest. I thought it was really good, so just wanted to pass that along. And then yesterday I was invited to present at the Washington Recovery Alliance, and it was an overview of the Liquor and Cannabis Board and opportunities for the recovery community to engage with the Liquor and Cannabis Board related to prevention in particular. And so it went really well, and I just wanted to pass that along to you guys and let you know that that occurred, and look for opportunities for the recovery community in particular to engage with us as a board.
That's great. Cool. Thanks. Ollie, anything?
No, I have nothing today.
Okay. Neither do I. Dustin?
Nothing for me. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Well, we will be back tomorrow morning at 10 for board meeting. So until then, we will adjourn the caucus meeting for September 27th, 2022. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.